Craig Hodges, a name some of you might know, but if you don't, you really should. He's a two-time NBA champ, a three-time winner of the three-point contest, and one of only 42 players to have a career three-point percentage of 40% or higher. Not to mention, Craig is also probably the most blatant example of the NBA blackballing a player. See, on top of Craig being one of the best shooters of his generation, he was also an outspoken activist, one that would write and hand-deliver a letter to George H.W. Bush advocating for the civil liberties amongst the black community during their championship visit to the White House. Craig was outspoken with his beliefs, trying to create unity for that same passion amongst his fellow teammates. But ultimately, that passion is what would put a target on his back by the NBA. And eventually, despite leading the league in three-point percentages for back-to-back championship-winning seasons, Craig would struggle to find a single team willing to offer him a contract after that 92 season. But anyone who knew Craig at all could have guessed that he wasn't going to take this lying down, so when the league extended an invitation to the three-point contest in 93 to try and save face to seem impartial, Craig happily accepted. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to win the award for the fourth straight season, but that performance should still be a standout moment in the NBA. And on top of that, there were a few other noteworthy moments in Craig's career that would eventually contribute to him being blackballed. So we'll look back on his story and see exactly how he was mistreated by the NBA. Growing up in the 60s, Craig was constantly reminded about the struggles of the people around him, and would often watch more conscious athletes of the time like Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and the NBA's own Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The opinions of these athletes, and those coming from his own father and grandfather, instilled a lot of the hardships and struggles that Craig would eventually go on in his career to bring light to. And as well as looking up to these many athletes, he was starting to break out and make a name for his own, playing ball at Rich East High School, and eventually would develop his game enough to earn a scholarship to Long Beach State, where he would go on to play under legendary coach Tex Winter, the man who's known for creating the triangle offense that Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan would use for those 6 championships. Craig thrived in this system, averaging 17 points a game, but unfortunately he fell pretty far in the draft, ending up with the San Diego Clippers with the 48th overall selection. He would spend the first 2 seasons with the Clippers struggling to find a role on that rebuilding team, as his shooting potential that was seen in college completely disappeared, as he averaged a horrific 22% from 3 for both of those seasons. However, during that offseason, he was sent to Milwaukee, and that's where he would truly break out. Over this stretch of his career, Craig's horrific three-point percentage went from 22 with the Clippers to 41% with the Bucks. He would also go on in the 86 three-point contest to set a record that still stands to this day, knocking down a record-setting 21 shots, a record that Steph was only able to finally tie in 2021. Since then, the NBA has added 10 extra points that you're able to score, but even still, Craig's 25-point round is still within the top 15 performances of the contest. With these performances, Craig's footing and notoriety in the NBA was growing, but not large enough that he was able to start speaking out on the issues that were truly important to him. But soon, he was going to be put on the biggest stage in the entire world.
Michael shakes the finger.
Unbelievable. Done it again. And the Chicago Bulls have won their first ever NBA championship.
Once you reach the top, where do we go from here?
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship, and it's their second.
In 1988, Craig was sent to the Chicago Bulls, and really that's probably one of the best times in history to be traded to the Bulls. A 25-year-old Michael Jordan was fresh off his 4th season, somehow already averaging 30 points for his career, also having an MVP and Defensive Player of the Year award under his belt. And with the Bulls finally breaking their first-round curse the year before Craig Hodges showed up, it really had seemed like there was nothing stopping Michael Jordan from becoming the face of the league and possibly the most dominant player seen since Wilt Chamberlain. So as debatably the league's best shooter at the time, this was almost as perfect of a fit you're gonna find for Craig Hodges. And it was instant success. In his first season with the Bulls, they were able to storm their way to the conference finals, but unfortunately they couldn't get it done in 7 against the bad boy Pistons. As many people know, it was the same story the following season, but for Craig, he was able to finally break through for a personal win as he finished out that season with the highest three-point percentage in the league, while also starting his three-peat run for the three-point contest. And shortly after his own personal successes, the Bulls would join too, finally sweeping the bad boy Pistons and moving on to the finals where they would come up against the Lakers. And this is where Craig would really make his first big move. At the time, there were no bigger athletes in the NBA and debatably America than Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. Coincidentally, they found themselves facing off in that year's finals, setting the stage for possibly one of the biggest events in basketball up to that point. And considering it gave the league the highest views it had since the early 80s, that take was pretty on the nose. However, the massive display that was the '91 NBA Finals had a chance of not happening at all. Before the series, Craig had approached Magic and his teammate MJ in an attempt to get them to boycott the finals. Oh, right, so the '91 finals was never in any real danger, as Craig's plan hinged on a man who famously said, "Republicans buy shoes too." And so this attempt fell flat on its face before even getting out of the gate. This attempt, however, still was noticed by David Stern, who famously doesn't take too kindly to someone trying to fuck with his TV viewership. And no doubt, just trying to get MJ and Magic to boycott this is one of the reasons that Craig was ultimately left without a contract just one season later. As mentioned again, Craig was still the top 3-point shooter in the league and was fresh off his back-to-back win in the 3-point contest. He was still in his prime at 31 years old, so there really isn't a whole lot of an explanation for why he was out of the league other than the aforementioned letter to the president or the attempt at a boycott. It seemed pretty clear that this was an obvious attempt by the league to try and silence Craig's voice. And it seems like the NBA might actually agree with that fact. See, what I didn't mention at the beginning is that Craig went ahead and sued the NBA for $40 million immediately after being invited back and participating in that 3-point contest. The lawsuit included claims of discrimination and collusion to try and keep him out of the league. The suit was ultimately settled out of court, but I still know what my takeaway from that is. Ultimately, Craig's career was cut short, and although he has found some success in different coaching avenues, he's never really been given the same opportunity at a coaching job afforded to other former players with similar standing, reputation, and ambitions in the league. Aside from his old coach Phil Jackson hiring him as a special assistant coach working directly under Phil. It's hard to fathom that possibly one of the league's best shooters had nothing left to offer the game, then as a player and now as a coach. Craig isn't the only player that has faced consequences for their beliefs in the NBA or other major sports leagues. But every time the league takes these decisions into their own hands, they're taking aspects of the game away from fans, all just to have complete control of the product that is the NBA. Ignoring that these players are just regular people that have their own beliefs and ambitions outside of the league. The importance of athletes like Craig Hodges and the ones that came before him cannot be understated, as they are all important, influential figures even after they are gone. And it's hard to say what the future would have looked like if they were never involved in their sport. I mean, you could argue if Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was never blackballed and still found his way to the Vancouver Grizzlies, that team might have been able to find an actual fan base and foothold in Vancouver. Mahmoud was one of the more exciting young players, but his treatment by the league after refusing to stand for the national anthem in '95 drew heavy criticism. And similarly to Craig Hodges, he found himself out of the league without anyone willing to offer him a contract only a season later. The league has on its appearances become more tolerable to allowing its players to have their own voice. But there are still moments that don't always look good, like when Daryl Morey expressed his support for Hong Kong in a tweet, and then the NBA was pretty quick to distance Daryl from the league, along with Adam Silver's favorite student, LeBron James, turning Lamau pretty quick to defend the league's interests. But for the most part, the league is improving how it handles players and league associates' opinions. And hopefully the days of seeing a career like Craig Hodges unjustly being cut short is being brought to an end.